His phone buzzed at 2 a.m., and I answered before I even thought about it. That's how every disaster begins in my life. Reflex over reason. The room was dim except for the faint blue light from the phone screen. Noah's name was on top, the message icon flashing like a heartbeat. I swiped before my brain caught up. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. "Miss me already?" a woman's voice whispered. It wasn't sultry or playful. It was too confident for that. She sounded like someone who had been whispering into the dark for a while, someone used to being answered. My chest tightened in the strangest way, like air had been replaced by glass dust. Noah jerked awake, instantly reaching for the phone, eyes wide. "Give me that, Tess," he said, voice hoarse, like he'd practiced being calm in his sleep. I didn't move. I just stared at him and saw everything. Not the confession, not the act, but the tiny fracture that told the entire story. His face was pale, pupils blown wide. Guilt is rarely cinematic. It's just stillness that arrives too fast. He tried again, a little louder. "It's a client, she's joking." I hung up. "A client who whispers at 2 a.m, I asked, my voice steadier than it should have been. He sat up, rubbing his face. "You're overreacting." That's what he always said when he didn't want to answer something. He could have patented that phrase. Maybe sold it at conferences for men who confuse charm with intelligence. I turned on the bedside lamp. The warm light hit his side of the bed, the neatly folded clothes on the chair, his phone still in my hand. The world didn't tilt or crumble. It just rearranged itself slightly out of order. "Noah," I said softly. "Who is that?" He exhaled like he was releasing a secret into the air. "A colleague. Lydia. We're working on a campaign. She probably had too much to drink." "Oh," I said. "So she drunk whispers to co-workers at 2 a.m. That's professional." He frowned. "You're twisting things." "No," I said. "I'm editing them." I placed the phone on the nightstand, still screen up, like a confession sitting between us. I didn't cry, I didn't yell, I just stared at him the way a professor studies an essay written in the wrong tense, knowing the writer missed something fundamental. He got up, muttering something about an early meeting. The sound of him showering filled the silence. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching the steam slip from the bathroom door and thinking how ridiculous it was that betrayal smells like eucalyptus body wash. By the time he came out, dressed and polished, I had already decided to pretend for the moment. "Coffee?" I asked. He looked surprised. "You're not mad?" "I'm observing," I said. That unsettled him more than anger ever could. He left in a hurry, nearly forgetting his laptop. When the front door closed, I took his phone again, scrolling. Not through messages, I wasn't ready for that, but through photos. The most recent was from a dinner 2 nights ago. White tablecloth, wine glasses, a woman's hand reflected in the spoon's curve. Manicured pale pink nails. Lydia, I assumed. I locked the phone and set it down like evidence I hadn't collected yet. By 8 a.m., I was at the university. The campus looked as ordinary as ever. Maple leaves stuck to windshields, freshmen pretending they weren't lost. I taught modern American literature at Larchmont College, a small liberal arts school that prided itself on being intimate. I always found that word ironic. People used it to mean nurturing, but it really meant everyone knew everyone else's business. I walked into class with my usual smile, the one that made students think I had my life together. My voice didn't shake once through the lecture on unreliable narrators. The irony wasn't lost on me. Around noon, Diane Holbrook stopped me in the hallway. Diane was the kind of neighbor who turned friendliness into sport. Always perfectly dressed, always informed about everyone's garbage collection schedule. "Morning, Tessa. You look tired. Late night?" she asked, tilting her head. I wanted to tell her everything and nothing at once. Instead, I smiled. Just grading papers. She laughed in that brittle way people do when they sense something beneath the surface, but can't quite name it. Well, tell Noah I said hi. I saw his car at the Lakeside Bistro the other night. You two are such regulars. I froze for half a second, enough to let the words lodge somewhere behind my ribs. We hadn't been there in months. I nodded politely. Sure thing, Diane. When I got back to my office, I closed the door and sat in the quiet. The blinds cast long, striped shadows across my desk. I opened my journal, the one I used for class notes, and wrote, "He lies effortlessly because it's easier than telling the truth slowly." It sounded like something I'd analyze in class, except this time the text was breathing in my house. That evening, Noah came home cheerful, carrying takeout and a bottle of wine. His sudden enthusiasm for domestic peace was as subtle as a marching band. "I thought we could have dinner together," he said, setting plates on the counter. I watched him bustle around like nothing happened. "Sure," I said. We ate in near silence until he started talking about his day. Marketing pitches, client presentations, the usual buzzwords that meant nothing. My mind wandered to the sound of that voice on the phone. "Miss me already?" I must have been staring too long because he paused. "What?" "Nothing. You just said brand synergy twice. I was wondering if it's contagious." He chuckled awkwardly. "Come on, Tess. Don't make this a thing. You know I love you." The words dropped between us, heavy and mechanical. I studied his face, the way his eyes shifted slightly when he lied. Not dramatically, just a flicker. Like he was glancing at the truth behind him and hoping I didn't see it. After dinner, he offered to do the dishes. That was new. I watched him scrub a pan with exaggerated effort. It was almost endearing, like watching someone audition for the role of repentant husband. When he went upstairs, I turned on the small recorder app on my phone. I hadn't planned it. My fingers just moved. Something in me wanted a record, not for proof, but for preservation. So that later, when he rewrote this chapter, I'd still have the original version. I followed him up, voice calm. "Can we talk?" He sighed. "Again?" "Humor me." He sat on the edge of the bed. "You're not going to drop this, are you?" "Should I?" "Tessa, I told you, Lydia's a colleague. We're collaborating on a campaign for the Ridgeway account. It's late nights, stress, inside jokes, that's all." "Inside jokes," I repeated, like whispering at 2 a.m. He rubbed his temple. "She sent that message as a prank." "Interesting choice of prank. How long have you two been joking?" His silence stretched just long enough to confirm everything. He didn't even realize silence could confess louder than words. I said softly, "I teach literature, Noah. I read between lines for a living." He finally looked at me. "You're being dramatic." "Possibly," I said, "but let's test it." I reached for his phone again. He tensed but didn't stop me this time. Maybe he was tired, or maybe he thought he could control the narrative if he looked calm. I opened his messages. There it was, Lydia Park. The top message, "Still thinking about last night." My throat tightened. I didn't read the rest. He started to speak, but I raised a hand. "Don't. I can't listen to the same excuses recycled with different names." He stood, pacing. "You have no idea how hard work has been. The pressure, the expectations." "Oh, please," I interrupted. "Don't drag corporate metaphors into adultery. You can't rebrand betrayal." He froze. The silence afterward was thick enough to chew. "I made a mistake," he finally said, voice low. "It's over." I clicked the recorder app again, letting it capture that sentence. "Is it?" I asked. Because I'd like to keep a record of when exactly it was over, before or after the whisper. His jaw clenched. "You're crossing a line." "No," I said. "You erased it first." He left the room, muttering something about space. I sat there, staring at the half-empty glass of wine on the nightstand. My hand shook slightly, not from fear but from restraint. Every instinct told me to scream, to break something. Instead, I opened my laptop. The cursor blinked at me like a dare. Title: The Anatomy of Deceit. Subtitle: A Study in Modern Marriage. I began typing. Not names, not direct accusations, just patterns. The kind of patterns that women recognize instantly and men pretend are coincidences. I wrote for 3 hours straight, fingers flying. It wasn't rage, it was clarity. By the time I stopped, my essay was a quiet autopsy of affection, how it starts sincere, then sours beneath the weight of performance, how a partner can vanish while still sitting across the table. I saved it and closed the laptop. The next day, my department meeting was filled with the usual academic theatre, arguments over budgets, debates about whether literature students should take statistics. I nodded when expected, but my mind kept returning to that whisper. When I got home, Noah wasn't there. His car was gone, his laptop too. A note on the counter read, "Working late, don't wait up." I laughed out loud. Of course. The house felt foreign. Every framed photo looked staged, every souvenir cheap. I poured a glass of wine and sat on the porch. The street was quiet, except for sprinklers clicking rhythmically like metronomes. Across the street, the Hayes' curtains glowed with blue light from their TV. I wondered how many other perfect houses hid small betrayals like mine. Maybe every manicured lawn covered the same rot. Around midnight, I uploaded my essay anonymously to an online journal that accepted personal narratives. I hesitated before hitting submit, then did it anyway. The next morning, I woke to chaos. My inbox had exploded with messages, students, colleagues, strangers. The essay had gone viral overnight. Apparently, suburban heartbreak sold better than poetry. My department head emailed, "Brilliant piece. I assume it's fiction." I replied, "Of course." Noah came home that evening looking rattled. "Tessa, what did you do?" I blinked innocently. "I taught class, graded essays, wrote something. Why?" "Don't play dumb. Everyone's talking about that article. It's obviously about us." "Is it?" I asked, tilting my head. "Because if it is, that means the things in it are true." "You sure you want to admit that publicly?" He stared at me, realization dawning slow and painful. "You're trying to ruin me." I smiled faintly. "No, Noah, I'm just telling a story. You wrote it. I edited." He stormed upstairs. I followed more slowly, recording again, quietly this time. He slammed drawers, muttering, "You always need control." "Correction," I said softly. "You needed control. I just reclaimed it." When he turned, his face was pale again, like that night. "You'll regret this." I shrugged. "Possibly, but at least I'll regret it honestly." He left the house an hour later, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. The echo lingered. I sat at the table, listening to the silence he left behind. For once, it felt peaceful. On impulse, I checked the essay's view count. Over 200,000 reads. Comments flooded the page. Finally, someone said it. This hit too close to home. "He sounds exactly like my ex." I smiled. The internet had turned my private ruin into public art. Maybe that was cruel, but it felt strangely fair. Later that night, I heard his car pull up outside. He didn't come in immediately, probably rehearsing his lines. I waited, calm, recording app ready again. When he entered, his tone was different, controlled, deliberate. "You need to take it down." "Why?" "It's humiliating." "For who?" He hesitated. "For both of us." "Only one of us lied," I said. "That narrows it down." He sat across from me, eyes sharp. "You think you've won?" "This isn't a contest," I said. "It's a syllabus. You just failed comprehension." He slammed his hand on the table. "You don't understand what you've started." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said, standing. "You built your reputation on perception. I just adjusted the lighting." He didn't reply, just stared, breathing unevenly. Then he left again, door clicking shut behind him. I stood alone in the kitchen, the faint hum of the refrigerator filling the space. I wasn't triumphant or sad, just awake. The next morning, the journal editor emailed me. Would you consider expanding this into a book? I looked out the window at our perfect quiet street, the trimmed hedges, the gleaming cars, the illusion of peace, and thought, why not? Because in this neighborhood, truth wasn't scandal, it was currency, and I was finally rich. By Monday morning, the world knew more about the anatomy of deceit than I ever meant to reveal. It wasn't supposed to become a trending topic, it was supposed to be a quiet exorcism of sorts, a few hundred readers at most, nodding in recognition and moving on. Instead, it had become a mirror people wouldn't stop staring into. I sat in the faculty lounge pretending to read an essay draft about Hemingway's masculinity, which now felt accidentally ironic. My phone buzzed with another notification. Op-ed of the week. The Anatomy of Deceit slices open suburban hypocrisy. A coffee splashed over my notebook when I laughed too suddenly. Slices open, dramatic choice of words for something that didn't even name names. Noah texted, "We need to talk." Now. I typed back, on campus, busy teaching the next generation to read between the lines. He didn't reply. By the time I reached my office, the dean was waiting by the door. "Tessa," he said gently, "your essay's getting attention, the kind that brings donors." "Glad to be of service," I said. He smiled, uneasy. "It's personal, though. Some people might speculate." "Let them. I changed the names. It's fiction." "Right," he said, clearly unconvinced. "Just be careful. The internet has a long memory." I almost laughed again. If only he knew how short some people's memory could be when they wanted to forget what they'd done. After class, I walked across the parking lot, under a sky that looked too clean for the kind of storm brewing beneath it. When I reached my car, Noah was leaning against it, sunglasses on like he was auditioning for calm. "We can't talk here," he said. "Then where?" "My office. The press room." He sighed. "Can we please not do this in public?" I unlocked the car. "Fine, follow me." He trailed behind me all the way home, keeping just enough distance to look cautious, like a man escorting his own downfall. Inside, he went straight to the kitchen, pacing. "You've humiliated me." "I wrote an essay," I said, setting my bag down. "You turned our marriage into entertainment." "Noah, if anyone sees themselves in that essay, it's because they recognize the behavior, not because I mentioned them." He leaned on the counter, knuckles white. "People at work are talking. Lydia won't even answer my calls." "Maybe she's practicing her whisper," I said. He shot me a look that could have shattered glass. "This isn't funny." "It's hilarious," I said. "You spent months lying, and now you're worried about perception." He took a step toward me. "You could have just confronted me, privately." "I did. Remember the phone call at 2 a.m? You said she was a colleague." He rubbed his temples, frustrated. "It was one mistake." I tilted my head. "A mistake implies something you trip over. You planned it." He sank into a chair, silent. That was my cue. I placed my phone on the table, recording app open, and sat across from him. "Let's start from the beginning," I said. He frowned. "Are you recording me?" "Yes. Transparency is therapeutic." He looked tired. "You're not well." "On the contrary," I said. "I've never been clearer." For a while he didn't speak. Then, quietly, "It started at work. She was easy to talk to. Things at home felt distant." "Ah," I said, "the classic justifying prologue." He scowled. "You were always busy. Your students, your essays. I felt invisible." "So you found someone who would stare at you like you hung the moon." He didn't answer. "She knew you were married, didn't she?" "Yes," he said finally. "Did that make it exciting?" His silence was confirmation enough. I leaned back, analyzing him the way I would a flawed protagonist. "You realize, Noah, you didn't cheat because of boredom. You cheated because you thought you could get away with it. That's the story you've been telling yourself, that you're misunderstood, not dishonest. He slammed his fist on the table. Stop psychoanalyzing me. Then stop being a textbook example, I said. We sat there, locked in a quiet standoff. I noticed a vein pulsing at his temple, a small tremor in his hand. It wasn't fear, it was exposure. After a while, he said, "You've ruined everything." "No," I said, "I've simply rewritten it with correct punctuation." He grabbed his keys and stormed out. The door slammed so hard the picture frames rattled. When the silence settled again, I replayed the recording. His voice sounded smaller than I remembered, hollow in places where charm used to live. I saved the file, labeling it research. The next morning, my inbox was even worse. Agents, journalists, talk show bookers. Apparently, betrayal was marketable. I declined all offers, but I couldn't resist reading the comments. They called me brave, brilliant, ruthless. Only one message caught my eye, an anonymous one that said, "He'll try to control the narrative. Don't let him." I couldn't help wondering who sent it. Lydia, maybe? Or someone else he'd confided in. Around noon, Diane knocked on the door holding a plate of muffins. "Thought you might need cheering up," she said, stepping inside without invitation. "You heard, I assume?" She tried to look surprised. "Oh, everyone's talking. But don't worry, I told them you're fine. Strong as ever." "Appreciate the public relations," I said. She leaned in conspiratorially. "Between us, I never liked her. Lydia, too perfect. Always filming herself in the gym parking lot." "You've met her?" "At the charity gala last fall. She practically hung on Noah all night. I thought maybe it was innocent, but..." She trailed off, pretending to look remorseful. I smiled thinly. "Your instincts are impressive, Diane. Maybe next time you'll warn me before the sequel." She flushed. "I didn't mean..." "I know what you meant," I said, taking the muffins. "Thanks for these." After she left, I tossed them straight into the trash. I'd had enough of sugar-coated sympathy. That night, Noah returned later than usual. He looked exhausted, tie loose, eyes shadowed. "We need to fix this," he said as soon as he walked in. "There's nothing to fix," I said. "Only consequences." He sat down heavily. "You think you've won, but you haven't. They'll forget you. These online people, they move on." "I'm counting on it," I said. "But you won't forget. That's the point." He rubbed his face. "What do you want, Tessa? Money? An apology?" "I want truth," I said, "and maybe a little discomfort. Yours, preferably." He laughed bitterly. "You always have to make everything a lesson." "I teach for a living," I said, "and you're a fascinating case study." He stared at me, eyes narrowing. "You've changed." "No," I said. "You just never paid attention." He stood. "I'm staying at a hotel for a few days." "Perfect," I said. "I could use the quiet." After he left, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at my desk. The cursor blinked on the screen, waiting. I opened a new document titled Confession. I transcribed parts of our conversation, his excuses, my questions. I wanted to see it in print, the rhythm of denial, the pauses of guilt. It was almost musical. Halfway through typing, I noticed something odd. My essay had been shared by Lydia herself. She'd posted it on her social feed with the caption, "Some people should be careful where they get their inspiration." The comments beneath it were split, half defending her, half attacking her. I stared at her flawless photo, the kind of smile that only existed when you thought you were winning. I saved the screenshot. Wednesday arrived with its usual suburban perfection, garbage trucks rumbling, sprinklers clicking, the neighbor's golden retriever chasing its tail like the world was fair. I went about my morning quietly, pretending not to check my phone every 10 minutes. At noon, I got an email from one of Noah's colleagues, unintentional allyship in my inbox. "Just so you know, Lydia's been gossiping about you at work. Claims your essay was a revenge fantasy. I replied simply, "How creative of her. Tell her fiction pays better than marketing." That afternoon, I gave a lecture on narrative reliability. Writers lie to reveal truth, I told my students. Characters lie to hide it. The question is, which one are you today? When class ended, one student lingered. "Professor Reed," she said softly, "I read your essay. It was honest. My mom went through something similar." "Thank you," I said. "Honesty's underrated these days." Her smile was sympathetic but not pitying. It was the first time that week I felt seen without being dissected. That evening, Noah showed up again, unannounced. He looked worse, creased shirt, unshaven. "We need to talk, privately," he said. "Again, I should start charging consulting fees." He ignored that. "You've made things worse. Lydia's threatening legal action." I raised an eyebrow. "For what? Being a muse?" "She says your essay defamed her." "Then she's admitting she's the Lydia in the story." "That's interesting." He hesitated, realizing the trap. "You're playing games." "No, Noah, I'm documenting history." He ran a hand through his hair. "You don't understand what this could do to my career." "I understand perfectly," I said. "It's doing it." He stared at me, silent. Then, quietly, "You recorded me the other night, didn't you?" "Yes." "That's illegal." "No, it isn't. Connecticut's a one-party consent state. Lucky me." He exhaled sharply. "You've planned this." "Not planned. Adapted, like any good writer." His expression shifted, fear mixed with admiration, which made me almost pity him. Almost. He sat down heavily. "You really hate me, don't you?" "I don't waste emotions on that word," I said. "I prefer accuracy." He leaned forward. "What will it take for you to stop?" I smiled faintly. "A little honesty. Say it on record." He stared at the phone I'd placed between us again. "You're serious?" "Completely." After a long pause, he said, "Yes, I had an affair with Lydia Park. It's over." "Good," I said softly. "Now say why." "She made me feel seen." "And I didn't." He hesitated. "You made me feel examined." I almost laughed. "There's a difference." "To men like me," he said. "A big one." His voice cracked just slightly on the word me. I knew then he wasn't sorry, just cornered. "Thank you," I said, stopping the recording. "You can go now." He stood slowly, confusion flickering in his eyes. "That's it?" "For now," I said. After he left, I transferred the recording to my laptop and saved it in 3 different places. Not because I planned to use it immediately, but because leverage, like literature, ages well when preserved. By Friday, the essay had reached television news. They called it the Manifesto of Modern Betrayal. The host's tone was equal parts admiration and warning. I watched with a bowl of cereal in hand, amused at how easily strangers turned private misery into content. Diane called again. "They mentioned you on Channel 7. You must be thrilled." "Thrilled isn't the word I'd use," I said. "Oh, you're so modest. I always said you had that spark. I told my book club you'd outshine him eventually." Her phrasing stuck with me. Outshine him. Like this was a competition for spotlight, not sanity. But maybe that's how our town understood life, as a contest for applause. When I hung up, I went upstairs and opened the closet. His suits still hung neatly, each a uniform of deceit disguised as professionalism. I pulled one down, folded it with exaggerated care, and placed it in a donation box. One by one, I stripped his side of the closet until it looked clean again. The silence afterward was strange, lighter somehow. Later that evening, Noah sent a message. "We need to settle this privately before more damage is done." I typed back, "Agreed. Come over tomorrow at 7. Bring sincerity." Saturday evening arrived crisp and unnervingly calm. The air smelled of cut grass and grilled burgers from somewhere down the block. The kind of suburban perfection that made sin feel out of place. He came right on time, suit pressed, voice carefully neutral. I spoke to HR. They're considering disciplinary action. You've crossed a line. Or maybe they're finally reading between them, I said. I can't lose my job. You mean you can't lose your image? He rubbed his face. You got what you wanted. I admitted it. What now? Now, I said, sliding the phone across the table. You sign this. He looked down at the document, simple, professional. A statement acknowledging that my essay was a work of fiction, inspired by general experiences, not identifiable individuals. It wasn't exactly a lie, just a well-phrased insurance policy. This protects both of us, I said. He hesitated. If I sign, you'll stop. I'll consider it closure. He studied my face, maybe realizing for the first time that he wasn't negotiating with the woman he once dismissed as emotional. I'd become something colder, sharper, practical. He signed. I smiled. Thank you, Noah. You've been remarkably cooperative. He looked uneasy. You planned this entire thing, didn't you? Let's call it improvisation with style. He stared at me, almost curious. Who are you now, Tess? Someone you created, I said. When he left, I opened my laptop again. The essay's readership had doubled. Publishers were reaching out. But I didn't reply to any of them yet. I wasn't done writing. I opened a new document, Part 2, the confession. First line. He said it didn't mean anything, but everything he touched after that carried the scent of deceit. I paused, reading it aloud, savoring the rhythm. Perfect. Outside, the sprinklers started again, ticking in perfect suburban harmony. Inside, my world was finally out of sync, and for the first time, I liked the sound. By Monday morning, the neighborhood seemed to have turned its gaze squarely on me. I walked past trimmed hedges and gleaming cars, feeling the weight of every whisper and sideways glance. Suburbia had its own rhythm, lawns watered, mailboxes pristine, gossip traded like currency. And suddenly, I was both wealthy and bankrupt in that economy. Wealthy in attention, bankrupt in trust. The first time Diane appeared at my door that morning, I wasn't surprised. She carried the faint scent of lilac perfume and a smile too polished for anything innocent. Morning, Tessa. You're looking radiant, she said, stepping uninvited into my living room. Her eyes flicked to the laptop on the coffee table, still open to my essay. Thanks, Diane, I said. Coffee? I gestured to the mug in my hand, hoping she'd sense the subtle warning. I wasn't in the mood for small talk disguised as concern. Don't be silly, she said, laughing. I came by to say, well, people are talking. The essay, it's everywhere. I set my mug down and leaned against the counter. Oh, everywhere? Yes, your college colleagues, local moms, book clubs, even the grocery store chatter. Margaret from next door was practically in tears discussing your insight. I smiled faintly. Tears in grocery store gossip were a curious metric for success. I suppose that's one way to measure impact. Diane gave me a look like she'd just uncovered a secret code in my expression. Tessa, it's brave, really, but, oh, I shouldn't say this, but Noah is not taking it well. I felt a flicker of satisfaction. No, he isn't. That much is obvious. She leaned closer. I think you might have underestimated how angry he is. He's seeing everyone, clients, co-workers. He's panicked. I'd hate for anyone to make a scene on your behalf. I raised an eyebrow. Are you warning me or threatening me? She straightened immediately. Nothing like that. Just concern. I nodded. Well, concern noted. Thanks for dropping by, Diane. When she left, the silence was heavy in the house, the kind of quiet that breeds strategy rather than reflection. I opened my laptop, scrolling through the latest online reactions. People were dissecting every word, interpreting every line as a veiled confession, a warning, or a manifesto. I smiled at the attention, but the thought of Noah's reaction made me sharper. By Tuesday, the tension escalated. I noticed subtle changes everywhere. The neighbor's dog barking excessively when Noah's car pulled into the driveway. The Hayes' curtains drawn just a fraction earlier than usual. Even my students whispered behind books, their curiosity almost palpable. It was as if the world had collectively paused to watch the unraveling of someone else's life, with me standing firmly in the eye of the storm. I had a lecture that afternoon on unreliable narrators. It felt, ironically, like a master class in my own situation. Writers lie not to mislead, but to reveal, I told my students. The narrative you trust is always filtered through a consciousness, often flawed. Never trust appearances completely. I could have been talking about Noah. After class, I parked across the street from Lydia's house. I hadn't done anything yet, but observation was a tool I intended to sharpen. Her white-painted driveway gleamed in the late afternoon sun. She was out, checking her social media while sipping a latte. Every gesture was deliberate, every smile curated. I noted the pristine order of her garden, the subtle placement of flowering pots near the door, the car parked at a perfect angle. Signals she wanted to show control over everything she touched. I didn't move closer. I just watched, noting patterns, cataloguing behaviors. I wanted to understand the world she thought she inhabited, then dismantle it methodically. Later, I returned home and found Noah's car gone. My heart didn't race, but my mind catalogued possibilities. Dinner would be delivered, wine would be poured, and conversations rehearsed. I could hear him in my imagination, the practiced charm, the half-hearted apologies, the insistence that nothing had truly changed. Around 7, the doorbell rang. It was Diane again. This time, she carried a basket of cookies and an expression that suggested she'd witnessed an apocalypse and wanted to make it palatable. "Tessa," she whispered conspiratorially, "I heard something awful. The Ridgeway account. Noah is under review. His boss is furious. They're talking disciplinary action." I held my smile. "Is that so?" "Yes. And Lydia, she's frantic. She called several times this morning, and when she realized Noah wasn't answering, she let her voice drop in imitation of whispering, 'Miss me already?'" I nodded. "A familiar line." She gasped theatrically. "I mean, you must have known about her, but still. Oh, it's delicious. You're brilliant." "Delicious is one word for it," I said. She leaned in. "You have to be careful. People don't like being exposed." "I'm counting on that," I said. By Wednesday, the neighborhood was in open speculation. I walked past the Hayes' yard, and Jennifer was leaning against the fence. "Tessa, is it true?" she asked, whispering like someone afraid the wind might overhear. "Is what true?" I asked, voice light but eyes steady. "Oh, come on. Don't play coy." "The essay. About Noah?" I shrugged. "It's fiction. Inspired by general behaviors, of course. Not anyone in particular." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "But he's under scrutiny now. People are talking. No, gossiping. And Lydia, she's—" "Occupational hazard for someone who can't stay in their lane," I said. Jennifer frowned. "You're not going to confront them?" I smiled thinly. Confrontation is not always necessary. Sometimes observation and subtle maneuvering are more effective. She blinked, as if trying to figure out whether I was being cryptic or insane. I left her there, puzzled and slightly agitated, perfectly under my control. Later, I sat in my kitchen, reviewing emails from Noah's colleagues who were reaching out, ostensibly concerned, but clearly fishing for validation. Every message was a miniature confession, admissions of noticing odd behavior, subtle references to company gossip, fear of being associated with scandal. The threads wove a network I could observe and manipulate if I chose. By Thursday evening, I was ready to test the first subtle escalation. Noah returned from work, looking composed, but I could see the tension in the set of his shoulders. I poured a glass of wine and invited him to sit. Tessa, please, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. Let's not do this again tonight. Do what? I asked innocently. This, he said vaguely. This interrogation, this strange academic experiment. I'm just gathering notes, I said, for the future. He frowned, exasperated. You're relentless. I'm thorough, I said. I suppose it's a habit. He sat down heavily, loosening his tie. I've tried to keep things calm, but everyone is talking. Even my mother called. She knows. You've turned our lives upside down. Upside down, I repeated. Noah, reality has a way of correcting itself. I just documented the process. He gave a bitter laugh. Documented, that's one way to phrase it. Would you like another? I asked, pouring more wine. He shook his head. I need time. Of course, take all the time you need. Meanwhile, I'll continue observing, cataloguing, interpreting. He ran a hand through his hair and left the room. I followed, only with my gaze, noting the tension in his gait, the unconscious tight grip on the door handle. I saved it as a small victory, less satisfying than I wanted, but important nonetheless. Friday morning, I went to campus and delivered another lecture, this time focusing on manipulation in modern literature. I used examples from Hemingway and Faulkner, but my students didn't need examples. They sensed the undercurrent in my voice, the sharpened edge that had appeared over the week. Some of them whispered after class, asking if the essay was true, and I smiled enigmatically. True enough, I wanted to say, for those who read carefully. When I returned home, Diane appeared yet again, uninvited, carrying her signature concern-laced cheer. Tessa, you're everywhere, she exclaimed. Local news, social media, they're calling it the manifesto of betrayal. Noah, I don't know how he's coping. I'm sure he'll manage, I said. Everyone adjusts eventually. She looked unsettled. You're not planning anything else, are you? I smiled thinly. Just documenting the next chapter. She left, and I walked to the window overlooking the street. Across the way, the Hayes' curtains were drawn tight, the golden retriever barking at nothing. Everything looked so normal, so suburban, yet beneath the facade, chaos had settled. I opened my laptop, drafting a follow-up essay. This one would explore deceit, observation, and public perception. I wanted the world to see the anatomy of dishonesty from every angle. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I checked my phone. Noah had sent a single message. We need to settle this before it spirals. I typed back, I'll consider a meeting. Bring honesty. Outside, sprinklers clicked into rhythm once more, the neighborhood performing its familiar choreography. I smiled. For the first time, I felt in control of the storm, rather than swept along by it. The game had only just begun, and I was already several moves ahead. By Monday, I realized subtlety wasn't enough. Observation and quiet documentation had given me a sense of control, but the neighborhood, the company, the tangled web Noah and Lydia had spun, none of it would unravel unless I acted. I decided it was time to break the picture frame and watch the shards fall. I began with careful preparation. I compiled the recorded confession, emails, and copies of my essay into a single folder. I wasn't reckless. Precision mattered. Every step had to appear natural, inevitable, as if the universe itself had been correcting an imbalance. Noah, of course, didn't see it coming. He never did. He thought his charm could outmaneuver reality. On Tuesday, I arranged the first move in what I called the ripple effect. I sent a carefully worded email to one of Noah's colleagues, someone quiet but influential. It wasn't accusatory, just a question about discrepancies he might have noticed in past campaigns. Did you ever notice anything unusual with Lydia's reports or Noah's assignments? Innocent enough to avoid direct confrontation, but loaded with potential consequence. I sent another note to HR, referencing general conduct standards, phrasing it as a concern for professional accountability rather than personal grievance. By Wednesday, subtle signs of unease began appearing. I noticed Lydia checking her phone compulsively, stepping away during meetings, adjusting her wardrobe as if preparing for surveillance. Noah became defensive without realizing why, his charm failing under the invisible pressure I was applying. That evening, I decided to escalate. I attended a small neighborhood charity gala, an event that Lydia and Noah often flaunted themselves at. I didn't confront them immediately. Instead, I positioned myself strategically. Every angle mattered: the way I entered, the casual smile I wore, the small but deliberate gestures that suggested awareness and control. They didn't see me at first. Lydia was mid-conversation with a local journalist, laughing at something trivial. Noah hovered behind her, hand resting lightly on her back, a picture of composure that I knew to be brittle. I approached, casually brushing past them. Lydia's expression faltered for a moment, a flicker of recognition she tried to hide. Noah's eyes narrowed slightly, sensing a threat but unsure of its magnitude. I waited until Lydia returned to the conversation, then I leaned toward a nearby waiter and whispered something innocuous, enough to ensure it would be overheard. Her smile stiffened, and she glanced around nervously. I didn't react, merely continued chatting with another guest, letting the small tremor propagate naturally. Subtle disruption, amplified by perception. Afterwards, I moved on to more direct action. I visited the small office Noah shared with a few close colleagues. I left a carefully folded note on his desk. Transparency matters. Remember that. Not accusatory, just precise. By the time he arrived, he found the note and my subtle signature, a mark that suggested I had been inside without anyone noticing. He flipped through emails, double-checking locks and office cameras, unaware that the presence of an observer had already altered his behavior. I could see the first cracks forming. A previously confident posture gave way to tension. A smile that had been easy now came with a hint of calculation. He was starting to respond to consequences he didn't fully understand. By Thursday, the effect expanded. Rumors began surfacing quietly within the company. Noah noticed colleagues glancing at him differently, holding conversations slightly out of his earshot, speaking in half-formed sentences that suggested private awareness. I didn't have to speak. The perception of action, the suggestion of knowledge, was sufficient to destabilize him. Meanwhile, Lydia became increasingly frantic. I noticed the subtle signs first online: Instagram posts deleted, stories that vanished minutes after uploading, the glossy photos replaced by awkward selfies clearly taken in haste. Social perception mattered to her, and I was systematically undermining it without needing to confront her directly. I escalated further that evening. I followed her discreetly to a small influencer event downtown. From a distance, I observed her navigating the space, the careful way she positioned herself near lights and cameras. Then I approached, timing my entrance to intersect her path as she turned a corner. "Excuse me," I said politely, letting my voice carry over the noise. "You might want to adjust that setup. It's showing the wrong logo." She froze, glancing at me with a forced smile. "Oh, thanks. I didn't notice." I nodded, turning to leave slowly. "Happy to help," I said. I didn't need to touch anything. The moment of disruption was enough. Her attention shattered, her composure slightly compromised, a ripple across her carefully maintained persona. Back home, I reviewed my own notes, cataloguing every reaction, every subtle tremor. Each incident created a chain reaction, and the chain had only begun. Noah was trying to regain control, but every effort drew him further into the maze I had created. He spoke in clipped sentences at dinner, attempted rehearsed smiles that failed, glanced at his phone repeatedly, and flinched at the smallest sound. I wasn't done. On Friday, I took the next calculated step: property disruption. Lydia had prided herself on perfection, and her home was an extension of that carefully curated image. Without entering illegally or damaging anything permanently, I used subtle, reversible actions to unsettle the space. I shifted furniture slightly while she was away at an appointment, placed objects in positions that would be noticed but not cause destruction, and left small notes that suggested observation. "You left this out of place. Is it intentional?" Enough to rattle, not ruin. The effect was immediate. She texted Noah, frantic, asking what was happening. He could offer no explanation, and the tension between them began to mount visibly. I watched through indirect observation, social media updates, neighbors' comments, snippets of conversation I overheard, while maintaining plausible deniability. Saturday arrived with a more public confrontation. A small boutique cafe, frequented by their social circle, became the stage. I entered first, selecting a table that provided a clear view. Noah arrived moments later, accompanied by Lydia. I sipped coffee, pretending to write, letting them see me, but not acknowledging them directly. Lydia's smile was brittle, forced, and I could see the internal panic she attempted to hide. Noah's posture stiffened, attempts at casual charm failing in real time. I stood, not directly approaching, and engaged in casual conversation with another patron, loud enough for them to hear snippets. Every word subtly referenced truth, integrity, observation, perception. Lydia's eyes flicked toward me, uncertainty replacing confidence. Noah shifted uncomfortably in his chair, aware of the power balance shifting in public view. I didn't need to speak directly to either of them. The suggestion of action, presence, and knowledge was enough. By Sunday, I had orchestrated the next wave, corporate awareness. Without directly accusing anyone, I submitted a formal, factual report highlighting inconsistencies in recent projects. No names were mentioned, no accusations made. Just documented discrepancies, phrased as concern for operational integrity. The timing was precise. By the time Noah and Lydia realized the implications, senior management was already reviewing the patterns I had outlined. I watched the storm build quietly. Emails and phone calls flooded their devices. Whispers became questions. Questions became scrutiny. I didn't need dramatic confrontation. The pressure of observation, the subtle choreography of disruption, was more effective than any spectacle. Monday arrived with visible tension. I attended my own lectures, teaching literature as though nothing had changed, while Noah and Lydia navigated a world that had quietly shifted beneath their feet. Each interaction they attempted was met with subtle, unavoidable consequences. Colleagues glancing away, minor oversights pointed out publicly, reputations beginning to bend. By Tuesday, their carefully curated social images began to falter. Noah's charm failed to persuade anyone. Lydia's meticulously posted selfies were critiqued and mocked in subtle, anonymous online circles. Small imperfections amplified, magnified by perception and awareness. My strategy was methodical, the ripple effect. Each small disruption compounded, creating an inescapable tension. That evening, I orchestrated a more direct public incident. At a social gathering, I subtly shifted the conversation so that the subjects of gossip naturally included them. Without pointing fingers, I referenced behavior patterns and observations that everyone recognized. Lydia's expression faltered. Noah attempted a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. A slight whisper here, a shared glance there, chaos without violence. The moment concluded without fanfare, but the effect was devastating. I watched from across the room as their confidence eroded. By Wednesday, I knew the plan was working. Noah's attempts to regain composure only highlighted his precarious position. He miscalculated every interaction, creating minor but significant social errors that spread through their network. Lydia, attempting to maintain control, only drew further attention to inconsistencies and small mistakes that compounded daily. I spent the evening documenting these developments. My essay drafts expanded, notes appended with precise observation. Every reaction was a data point, every hesitation a confirmation of my strategy. The neighborhood, corporate environment, and social networks were now aligned in a tension I had orchestrated carefully. Thursday arrived, and I executed a final subtle escalation for the week. I arranged for a minor property disturbance at Lydia's home, a small, obvious misalignment of furniture and objects that suggested intrusion, yet caused no real damage. Messages arrived between her and Noah, frantic and confused. He could not account for what had occurred. The tension between them reached its peak without a single overt act from me. That night, I reflected on the week. The storm had begun quietly, unnoticed by the world, yet its effects were unmistakable. Noah's confidence faltered, Lydia's composure cracked, and the perception of control, so long held as their advantage, was now slipping from their grasp. I sat in my living room, glass of wine in hand, and watched the street outside, sprinklers ticking in rhythm. Perfect suburban order contrasted with the subtle chaos I had cultivated. I drafted the next chapter of my follow-up essay. Observation without action is inertia. Subtle action without perception is chaos. The intersection of both is power. It was true not only academically, but personally. The tools of insight, careful planning, and indirect action had shifted the balance. The first stage of disruption was complete. The ripple was now visible, the cracks evident, and the storm gathering momentum. Noah and Lydia didn't yet understand the extent of the control I wielded. By Friday, the tension was palpable even from a distance. Casual interactions were strained, missteps magnified, and the fragility of their perceived dominance became obvious to all who observed. I had orchestrated it without a word of accusation, without confrontational drama. It was a victory of subtlety, precision, and patience. By the weekend, they were a different duo, publicly poised, privately unraveling. Every glance, every movement betrayed uncertainty. I catalogued it, noting patterns and reactions with the methodical clarity of a scholar observing an intricate experiment. The neighborhood gossip, once a tool they wielded with precision, now worked for me. Information spread through subtle channels, magnifying anxiety without overt confrontation. The week closed with a quiet triumph. I poured a glass of wine, sat by the window, and allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. The first wave of disruption had been successful. Observation had become action, perception had become power, and the stage was set for the next phase. Noah and Lydia were already reacting, unable to fully trace the origin of the tension that now dominated their lives. The suburban storm was no longer a metaphor. It had a tangible form. Their world, carefully constructed, had begun to crumble in silence. The chaos was orchestrated, precise, and entirely under my control. And for the first time since discovering the whisper at 2 a.m., I allowed myself to smile. I was ready for the next move. By Monday morning, the cracks I had carefully cultivated were widening into chasms. Noah's composure had all but vanished, replaced by tight smiles and cautious glances. Lydia's carefully curated perfection was cracking. The slightest disruption caused visible panic. I had shifted from observer to orchestrator, and the next phase required precision and spectacle. The suburban stage was set, and it was time for the performance. I started with public perception. Invitations to social events arrived daily, and I selected one that offered maximum visibility, the annual Larchmont Charity Gala. This was the event where Noah and Lydia displayed their curated life, the perfect partnership, the polished appearances, the whispers of admiration disguised as gossip. I intended to redefine the narrative entirely. I arrived early, in a simple yet striking dress that suggested understated confidence rather than calculated elegance. From a distance, I observed the room. Lights reflecting off crystal chandeliers, the polished gleam of wine glasses, the subtle buzz of high society small talk. Noah and Lydia arrived together, a tableau of control and charm. Lydia's smile was bright, too bright, and I immediately noted the slight tension in her shoulders. Noah's posture had the stiffness of a man attempting to hide a flinch. I maneuvered deliberately through the crowd, each step considered, each glance measured. I allowed myself to be noticed just enough, passing in view, sharing a polite nod with acquaintances, letting my presence ripple through their awareness. They recognized me, of course, and their immediate adjustment was gratifying. Lydia's lips pressed tighter, Noah's eyes flicked toward me multiple times. Awareness of observation was powerful. I stationed myself strategically near the dessert table, casually chatting with a local organizer. My voice carried naturally over the soft music, and I deliberately referenced themes of integrity and authenticity in conversation. Nearby, Lydia laughed nervously at a joke I hadn't made. Noah's hand twitched near his wine glass, as though grasping for control. Small cracks, subtle but undeniable. After a few minutes, I shifted my position. I approached a group discussing recent charity projects, dropping casual observations that could not be ignored. It's fascinating how some campaigns succeed because everyone's watching, while others fail when attention wanes. I said lightly, making eye contact with Lydia just long enough to provoke a subtle reaction. She faltered in her laughter, nearly spilling her drink. Noah's forced chuckle was shorter than intended. Observation had become disruption. I took the next step with calculated care. Moving behind a small podium set up for speeches, I casually adjusted a microphone cable, ensuring my movement would be visible but not suspicious. The subtle gesture drew Lydia's eye. She stiffened, scanning the area for witnesses. Noah followed her gaze, realizing too late that he had lost control of the environment. A whisper among the attendees, directed at no one in particular, carried enough suggestion to create doubt. "Did you see that?" Small moments accumulated into anxiety, and I observed with the satisfaction of a scholar noting experimental results. Later, I moved closer to Lydia's designated seating. The table was immaculately arranged, every utensil aligned, napkins folded with precision. I reached for the water pitcher, deliberately knocking it slightly, so the tablecloth shifted and a single wine glass wobbled. The room was quiet enough to notice the subtle disturbance. Lydia's hand twitched instinctively, straightening the arrangement while muttering under her breath. Noah's expression betrayed irritation and helplessness. I stepped back, mingling naturally, allowing the incident to leave its impression. No one directly accused anyone, but the tension propagated through social perception. Their performance of perfection had cracked, and the cracks were now visible to all who watched closely. By mid-evening, I orchestrated a more direct confrontation without overt engagement. During a pause in the speeches, I approached the stage area, positioning myself so that I was clearly in view of the main floor. I engaged in casual conversation with the event's coordinator, asking about minor logistical discrepancies. My voice carried naturally, just loud enough for Lydia to notice. Her smile stiffened. She glanced toward Noah, whose composure had begun to falter. A subtle but unmistakable disruption. Later, I left the gala briefly and returned with a small, controlled escalation. A handwritten note, folded delicately, appeared on Lydia's seat. Attention to detail matters. Even small oversights are noticed. I placed it carefully so that the waiter saw me handling it, but assumed it was standard decor adjustment. The note's arrival caused Lydia visible discomfort, her fingers trembling slightly as she unfolded it. Noah's eyes widened just enough to betray unease. The ripple effect propagated through their social circle, creating tension without confrontation. By Sunday, the public and social pressure had become undeniable. Noah and Lydia had retreated from interactions, each step measured, each word filtered. The network of perception I had cultivated worked in my favor. Every minor error, every micro-expression, every misplaced gesture was amplified by awareness. I observed from a distance, noting reactions, recording subtle shifts. I moved to the next phase, private, physical disruption. It was not violence, not even overt confrontation, but precise, tangible influence. Lydia's car, a symbol of her curated life, received a minor, reversible inconvenience. I adjusted tire alignment slightly, enough to cause uneven wear and subtle handling differences. Not dangerous, not permanent, but noticeable. When she drove the next day, I observed from a safe distance. Her grip tightened on the wheel, a subtle frown creasing her forehead. Anxiety had become tangible. Simultaneously, I employed indirect influence on Noah's home life. Household items shifted, subtle disruptions that created unease without evidence of intrusion. A book slightly out of place, a cushion misaligned, the coffee table subtly adjusted. Each small act propagated awareness of observation. Noah noticed, naturally, but had no reference for origin. His attempts to rationalize each incident only amplified stress. By Tuesday, the dynamic between them had shifted significantly. Their once confident interactions now carried hesitancy. Casual gestures, previously automatic, now required conscious calculation. I observed from a distance, noting micro-expressions, verbal pauses, and hesitant glances. Their social facade remained, but the underlying stability was fractured. Midweek, I orchestrated a public escalation designed to provoke maximum awareness. At a small cafe frequented by their social circle, I positioned myself deliberately, arranging casual interactions that reference themes of accountability, perception, and observation. Lydia's composure faltered visibly. Noah attempted to compensate, but every effort only highlighted the instability I had introduced. The ripple effect extended beyond their immediate perception, as nearby patrons noted tension, whispering quietly. Later, I executed a more subtle form of psychological leverage. Through anonymous messaging channels, I provided hints of discrepancies in work and social behavior to colleagues and neighbors alike. Each communication was phrased as casual observation, never accusation. The result was immediate: minor disruptions in interactions, hesitancy in decision-making, and increased self-consciousness. Noah and Lydia were reacting, not to confrontation, but to perception of oversight, and the effect was profound. By Thursday, the combined influence of public scrutiny, private disruption, and social pressure had created a palpable shift in their behavior. Noah's charm had become strained. Lydia's composure was fractured. Each step they took was calculated, measured, and increasingly hesitant. I noted every detail in my documentation, ensuring that the chain of influence was recorded for reference, a meticulous study of control. That evening, I orchestrated a final controlled incident for the week. Lydia's home, a symbol of curated perfection, received minor, reversible disturbances. Objects subtly misaligned, furniture slightly shifted, visual cues of observation inserted in plain sight. I observed from a distance. Lydia noticed immediately, her posture stiffening, fingers fidgeting as she attempted to restore order. Noah's reaction was more subtle but discernible: tension in the jaw, a slight tremor in the hands. The dominoes had been set. The ripple effect continued to propagate. By Friday, the cumulative impact was undeniable. Noah and Lydia's interactions, both public and private, reflected heightened awareness, apprehension, and uncertainty. Social cues, casual conversations, and minor errors all carried amplified significance. The suburban stage I had orchestrated was fully active, and I observed the results with methodical satisfaction. I spent the evening cataloguing reactions, documenting shifts in behavior, and noting subtle expressions of anxiety. Each data point confirmed the efficacy of my strategy. Perception, subtle disruption, and indirect influence had destabilized control without overt confrontation. Saturday arrived with visible tension. At a local market, I observed interactions between Noah, Lydia, and acquaintances. Each word, glance, and gesture was measured. Previously confident expressions were replaced by hesitation. Lydia checked her phone obsessively. Noah attempted forced casualness that failed under scrutiny. The ripple effect had reached social awareness beyond the immediate circle, and I noted it meticulously. By Sunday, the final subtle maneuvers for the week were complete. Observation, social influence, and physical cues had created a network of pressure that left Noah and Lydia reacting constantly, without the ability to regain the perception of control. I reviewed my documentation, notes, recordings, and observations, noting patterns and responses with precision. As the week closed, I allowed myself a rare moment of satisfaction. The first wave of public and private disruption had been successful. Social perception, personal anxiety, and subtle physical influence had combined to destabilize control and create tension that propagated naturally. Noah and Lydia were reacting, trapped within the web I had constructed. I poured a glass of wine and sat by the window, observing the quiet suburban street. The sprinklers ticked methodically, the streetlights flickered as evening approached, and the neighborhood maintained the illusion of calm. Beneath it, chaos thrived, subtle, controlled, and entirely orchestrated. The first phase of disruption had concluded, and the next stage awaited. Public perception had shifted, private tension had escalated, and the stage for more deliberate confrontation and strategic influence was set. Noah and Lydia were cornered by circumstances I had created without a word of accusation or overt aggression. The fire behind the smile was now fully visible. The performance of perfection, meticulously cultivated over months, had begun to unravel, and I sat at the center of it, not a participant, but the conductor of a symphony of consequence. The suburban storm had reached its crescendo, and I was ready for the next movement. By the time I arrived at Noah's office that night, everything was set. The weeks of quiet orchestration, of subtle shifts and controlled revelations, had led to this moment. The air inside was still, faintly humming with fluorescent light, and the desk between us felt less like furniture and more like a courtroom bench. Noah walked in first, his once effortless charm now a fragile mask. Lydia followed, immaculate as always, but with the jitter of someone who had lost her script. I gestured for them to sit. "Thank you for coming," I said evenly. "It's time to talk about what happens when the truth stops waiting." Noah leaned forward, voice careful. "Tessa, there's no need for this drama." "This isn't drama," I said. "It's documentation." I pressed play on my laptop. His recorded voice filled the room, his late-night explanation, his soft attempt at damage control. Lydia's breath caught as the sound echoed, familiar and incriminating. When it ended, I let the silence linger until it pressed against their nerves. "You lied, Noah," I said quietly. "Not just to me, but to yourself, to everyone you needed to believe in your version of things." He looked exhausted, eyes darting between me and the screen. "You're twisting everything." I slid a printed page across the desk. His own words stared back at him from an email. "I don't twist," I said. "I record, I quote, I verify." Lydia finally spoke. "You can't use this." I turned to her. "Can't? You're in no position to define that word anymore. The evidence exists whether you approve or not." The control they had clung to so tightly, so publicly, was dissolving in real time. Noah's hand shook slightly. He'd built an entire life on charm and silence, but silence no longer served him. "This isn't about revenge," I said. "It's about equilibrium. You broke it. I'm restoring it." Noah tried a smile that didn't survive contact with his reflection in the window. "You've already taken enough." I've taken nothing, I said. You offered it up piece by piece the moment you chose dishonesty. I stood, walking around the desk. The sound of my heels was deliberate, steady. When I reached him, I leaned close enough for him to hear every word clearly. You once told me perception is everything. You were right. Now everyone sees you exactly as you are. He didn't speak. Lydia's eyes glistened, not with remorse but with calculation, as if she were searching for the next move. I let her look and find none. You both built an illusion, I said, stepping back. All I did was hold up a mirror. Noah's voice broke through the quiet. So, what happens now? Now? I closed my laptop. Nothing happens. It's over. You live in the space you created. Every story needs a conclusion, and this one ends here. Lydia's hand trembled on her purse strap. You'll regret this, she murmured. I smiled faintly. No, I already regretted enough before I started. They rose slowly, as though unsure if leaving was permitted. When the door closed behind them, the office felt lighter, stripped of its tension. I looked at the scattered papers, the laptop screen, reflecting the final line of my essay draft. Control isn't taken, it's revealed. Outside, the parking lot shimmered with rain. I stood by the window, wineglass in hand, watching their silhouettes under the streetlight. They walked apart, not together. The illusion was gone, the balance restored. For the first time in months, I felt stillness, not peace, not joy, but something steadier. Completion. The truth, in all its quiet inevitability, had done its work. The story was finished. No epilogue required.